Hello, everyone. Welcome to our discussion of the reading response essay. This is just sort of a way of going over the assignment and also the sort of first steps. This should help you understand both the assignment, the rubric, and then how to get started on that project. So first, let's look at the assignment. Here it is from Canvas. And really what I want you guys to know is when designing English 101 classes, what I really wanted to do was to design writing assignments that would help you not just in college. I will focus in my 102 classes more on writing academically with research, all of that stuff. But learning about how to use and leverage rhetoric outside of the classroom is really important to me. And so this first assignment is actually based on something that I've written a lot in my professional career outside of teaching. Most teachers don't even have to do this, but it is a very common tool for anyone across any field is to do the self-evaluation at the end of every year. So we call it yearly self-evaluations. It's an HR document. When I was studying change management and project management, these are documents that we would use to understand our teams, and we would make decisions based on these for promotions and for raises, especially if we were seeing the kinds of engagement with growth that we wanted in the org. What you guys need to know is like it's still rhetorical. You're still presenting a rhetorical argument. You're still being analytical, but you're self-evaluating. And so that's what this is really designed to start to make you think about is how to write these kinds of things. They're also helpful. The analytical part is going to be helpful in job letters. Your final writing assignment to me will be very similar to this. So just keep that in mind as we're progressing. The goal here is for you to look at all the readings we did for this unit and to start to decide or discover what things you want to work on to read better. We covered analytical documents like the philosophy. We covered documents from different cultures like the Tao or like Chimunda Ngozi Adichie or like Khalil Gibran or Edgar Carrot and Syed Kashua. So what you can do is you can start to think about what helped you to read and what was a hindrance to your ability to understand what you were reading. And that's really what the first step of the assignment, we call it invention work, is. I'm asking these questions mostly to push you to start thinking about them, but invention work is very personal. In many institutions I teach at, we talk about the private or the individual writing process. For people who consider themselves like, I'm a visual person, maybe mapping it out visually, like this, is much more helpful. And so you can start to maybe put boxes into readings you struggled with, and maybe you're putting the same kinds of struggles together, and maybe your things you read well and putting them closer together if you read them well for similar reasons. But if you're visual, you might do something like this. If you're a little bit more chaotically minded, as I tend to be, maybe you just have a bunch of thoughts in your head. And so answering questions and just spitballing words onto the page is the way to go. This invention assignment is going to be the first DQ for my online classes this week. And I am not grading it based off of anything other than you're starting to put onto paper organizations and ideas about what skills you're going to talk about. And so that's what these first questions are really meant to do, is just like think about, hey, I really liked this piece. And when we talked about it, I feel like everyone I talked to sort of had the same idea here. Or when we listened to Trevor's lecture, or when I checked AI, like these are things that really helped me, and I think I got it. And then with the struggles, these are things that you didn't get. When I did this, I came up with this, AI told me this, and then I listened to Trevor's lecture and it was this. I really struggled here. What we don't want is we don't want the topic sentences to be about individual readings. We want the topic sentences to be about skills, because that's what this is about. It's about reading skills. So you always want to connect the skills to a reading, but you don't want the whole paragraph to be about a single reading. And that's what you're doing here is like, however you organize it. For example, on the other side, you may be just free writing, or you may be like, oh, maybe you're very, very focused and analytical person. You'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to do a Dici, what went well, right? And what were struggles? And maybe you're just going to list these out and you're going to create that list. That will be perfectly fine too. That's sort of how these things can work. It's personal. It's you. You're going to do it however you feel comfortable doing it. And that's a really important part of this writing process is you're learning how you do it. I can't teach you how you do it. I can only give you skills or give you help. If you are struggling with that, reach out. Email me, send me a Discord message. Let's talk about it and let's get you understanding your writing process. Once you do that, once you understand what you're going to talk about, we want to organize it. I know I'm putting this sort of in step-by-step process. My lesson to you is more about the things that work here are learning how to do it, and then as you do it more and more, it kind of just automates the process. So while we're doing it mechanically right now, I, for example, will often skip organizing things into meaningful paragraphs because I will do that now automatically, having 20 years of experience of doing it. So that's the idea, and that's where you can see this document. This is the outline. You can turn in an outline for your invention work if you want. What's going to happen is you're going to go from invention work to a draft, and the rough draft will be peer reviewed by at least 2 members of your class, and then from there you're going to write a final draft based off of the peer reviews. So if you do want to outline, these documents are available. Not only do you have these reading reflections, this is Model 1, M1, but I actually created a blank PowerPoint that you guys could fill in if you so choose. My in-person classes, we will be doing this in class together. So let's look at the actual essay and what I'm asking you to do, because it should be very apparent, number one, what each paragraph is doing and how each thing is working. So notice it's color-coded. That color code is purposeful, right? This purple color here is the intro, right? Begin by talking about your history with reading. In Brave New World's essay, we'll start to talk about intros a little bit more. This is a little bit more personal, so what's important here, and you'll see this in the rubric, is we want to start by defining our topic. Our topic here is your relationship to reading. And that is going to lead us to a scope of what you read well and what you don't read well. Why? Because if you have a history of reading something, like short stories, or you don't even have a history of reading, that's going to tell us a lot about your skills. And so there's a natural progression here from topic, the bigger, wider thing, to the more narrow discussion of, I just want to talk about how I read things well or not, to the thesis of, here is a very particular skill that I do well. Here are 2 skills that I am struggling with, or 2 reading styles I'm struggling with, and going on from there. So that's the idea of the intro, right? Begin by talking about your history with reading. What is your relationship to reading now? There's a narrative, right? I started reading when I was 4, or I started reading a lot when I was 7. I remember these books. This was my favorite book as a kid. Or it could just be like, I only read when a teacher makes me. I hate reading. Or it could be like, I read a lot of Instagram posts. Or if you're like me, a Redditor, I read a lot on Reddit every day. I read the news religiously. I am very well informed about what's going on around the world because I think that's important. So that would be what I talk about. Reading here does not necessarily just mean books. This is about what you guys are reading on your own. Reading subtitles, meaning reading manga or anime, or reading graphic novels. Whatever you're reading, talk to me about. Because that'll help you understand where these skills are coming from. Then come up with a thesis about what you think your reading skills are now. What do you do well, and what are your areas to improve? What we don't want is this list. I have these reading skills. We want it to be an active, and we want to build a relationship between those reading skills. You will see in the model, if you follow the model, you'll be fine. So pay attention to things like that, right? We want to use meaningful categories and abstract, meaning we want to talk about themes. We want to talk about narrative or philosophical text. We want to find themes in what our skills are doing, right? Maybe it's a language problem. Maybe it's a reading proficiency problem. Maybe it's a problem of the language is old, or the history of it eludes you, right? Or it's confusing, right? Whatever you want to talk about, that's okay. So there's reading models that will help you, and there's videos on those reading model or the essay models that will help you. But this is where your intro ends. That is your thesis statement. Your intro should always end in a thesis statement, because what you're signifying is, here's all the information you need to understand my argument, and then here is my argument. And once you give that argument, you don't want to go back to introducing. You want to keep moving forward. And from there, we move into our body paragraphs. Now, you should be starting with your success. Why? Because we're building a logical sequence here. So we start with our success, and then we move on to our two struggles, so that in our conclusion, we can discuss how we plan on overcoming those struggles. It would make less sense to do struggles than a success and then go back to how we overcome our struggles, because I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying this is sort of the easiest way to work. If you would like to take a stab at playing with that logic, I welcome you to do it. There are ways in which it can work. And one of the models, the reason there are two models, is that in one of the models, I'm showing things as both a success and a failure. So while it helps me to want to read something, I don't read it well. And so that makes me want to read it more. And there's a gray area there. I'm trying to show you that gray area. There is no right way to write this essay. There are certainly wrong ways, like not talking about your reading skills at all, not having a thesis statement, but there is no correct answer. There are many correct answers. Each body paragraph should start with a topic sentence. That topic sentence should include a category or a theme of what you're struggling with or what you succeed in, and then using evidence from your experience. I get asked a lot, well, do we directly quote the text? And I'm like, I would directly quote the text if you're telling me you're having trouble reading the text. If you're saying the language is confusing, the best evidence you could provide is language that you find confusing and how you're confused by it. But if you're talking to me about sort of the narrative arcs and the narrative forms, maybe a quote isn't as necessary. And so learning what evidence is necessary in order to prove a claim is a really big lesson in English 101. And then, as I said, in your conclusion, you are talking about how you plan on overcoming the challenge in your reading skills, knowing that in your major in college, you're going to have to read abstract text. You're going to have to read old things. You're going to have to read things you find boring. You're going to have to read things that are in dense language, or, all of these things that we've been reading. You're going to keep reading those things. And so you have to learn how to overcome them. You could talk about what you do in class. You talking about it like what you do at home, things that we've done in class together, like using AI to help with reading comprehension, or talking to peers, right? Like, the idea here is that you're building a path forward. As you can see down here, there is a rubric. I will be using this rubric to grade you, and it goes exactly as I just said, right? The introduction doesn't sound like you're responding to questions, right? So you shouldn't be like, I read this when I was 5. I got to 10 and I'm reading this. I read this now. That it should be much more fluid. It should be a narrative that you're presenting to get me to that thesis, which is a very common problem in English 101, because you guys were taught these bullet point formats for writing a paper, but none of the papers you're reading for college in academics, do they sound that way? So you have to learn how to fill in those gaps. The thesis follows the model. It presents a relationship between, it doesn't just list things. I have 3 skills that I'm going to talk about. That's not a great thesis. Talk to me about the relationship between those three skills. And then your paper builds those relationships. The body paragraphs include all the things we said, a topic sentence. The first one here just says it's a success because that's the paper as designed. It doesn't mean you have to do it that way, but it's the first thing I'm looking for. What you did well, and you're providing evidence. That evidence may or may not be direct quotes. It may be things we said in class. I went home, I read it, I thought the thing around your neck was this. We came to class, or I went to the DQs. Everyone agreed that it was this. Trevor's lecture in the video said this. Things like that will be how you prove that you have that reading skill. Body paragraphs 2 are the same. It's just these are struggles. And then you conclude with closure. And that closure is based on the overcoming of those gaps. For APA, I'm not requiring in-text citations. We will be requiring those for Brave New World. I didn't even give you enough bibliographic information, and citing lectures and videos and things gets really complicated. I'm not worried about it right now. So you don't worry about in-text citations for things you're quoting from class or books. You should still be using quotation marks or attributing them to somebody else, because otherwise that is plagiarism. But you don't have to cite them right this second. But APA has a cover page or a title page. It has page numbers. On the first page has at the top of the text is the title again in title case. It should have double spaced in appropriate fonts. This is not the time to get fun with fonts. You guys should just stick to the standard fonts, Calibri, Cambria, Times New Roman, or whatever's the approximate in the word processor you're using. And you should not have subheaders. Subheaders is something that you get into when you're writing much more longer, complicated assignments. You shouldn't have grammatical errors. So this is how you're being graded. This is the assignment. Hopefully you understand how to move forward. The idea that I'm really trying to reinforce for all of you is the first thing we do is we find evidence. We don't start by saying, I'm going to write a paper about X, now I need to go find evidence. The first thing we do is we find evidence. So you guys have been reading all these things that were challenging for various reasons to find evidence of your reading skills. I was stress testing your reading skills so that you guys could do it. Notice you were never graded on how well you read a document. It was you're reading the document and coming ready to prepare to talk about it was the grade. And now we can look at, okay, these are our struggles and these are our successes. So be sure you're ready for that. We start with evidence. We then come up with a thesis that describes our evidence, and then we start writing and organizing a paper. If you guys have questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. I try and schedule writing workshops during this week, so keep looking for announcements for whether I have writing workshops available to you. And anything else you need, I am dedicated to your success as my student, so please feel free to reach out.